Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the circumstances under which the Conservatives will have to abandon their damaging Brexit ideology and how it is absolutely crucial that this happens in order to fully reverse Brexit. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So first of all, sorry about the sound. I am quite ill at the moment. I'm recording this at my computer to make things easier, and there may be some disruption to the schedule if I don't start to feel better soon. I will keep you updated on the community tab as necessary. But Brexit. First thing to point out is we can't fully reverse Brexit until one of two things happens regarding the Conservatives. First, that they cease to be an electoral force. This doesn't seem feasible. They've been around in some form or other for centuries, representing the interests of the ultra wealthy, who will always make sure that they have the funding and media propaganda to appeal to voters. Even if we did switch to proportional representation, which I pray for daily, they would adapt. I mean, it would hopefully mean that the extremists can't control their party as easily, and even their relative moderates cannot wield 100% of the power, but they would still bob along in some form. The second is that they abandon their period of Brexit madness and start taking a more pragmatic view of international relations again, which means deciding that Brexit was actually a really bad idea. Now, this sounds equally ridiculous right now, but it will happen. Bear in mind that the Conservatives were against Brexit. There was no major political party in this country that was in favour of Brexit. You know, the people pushing it from within the Conservatives were entryists, really, from UKIP or similar organisations, and those representing right-wing global interests not aligned with the UK's interests. The reason that the real Conservative MPs did not stop Brexit dead in its tracks is because the entryists adopted the tactics of political terrorists. They threatened to split the party and consign it to years of bitter infighting. You know, bear in mind that although Conservative MPs were largely in favour of the EU, Tory party members tend to be more extreme in their views. You know, not at all helped by their daily dose of the Mail, Sun or the Express. But if the Conservatives lose the next general election, and especially if it's quite badly, then the motivation for Conservative MPs to persist with Brexit, particularly a very hard Brexit, massively drops. You know, I don't expect it to be a full about face, but I do expect very quickly for them to at least acknowledge that the trade barriers were a really bad idea. You know, if they find themselves in opposition and still without a credible leader to take them forward, because at the end of the day, they're scraping the barrel right now, let's be honest, then they'll end up splitting the party anyway. You know, at that point, you can absolutely see the sort of reinvention of the party taking place, as Labour did under Neil Kinnock in the 80s. So next, it's also worth explaining why this is important. Put simply, rejoining is impossible without this. Various figures in the EU have made it clear that even if there is strong public support in the UK for rejoining, which there surely will be in time, they will not even consider allowing us to rejoin until the matter is what's called politically settled in the UK. It takes a long time to join the EU. The last thing our European neighbours want to do is waste precious time and resources working with us for membership, with the difficult negotiations that this would entail, only for a still Brexit-loving Conservative Party to come back to power and wreck the whole thing again. And it doesn't matter whether this happens as we're negotiating, as we're implementing, or even after we've rejoined. A Brexit government emerging again would be an absolute nightmare for the EU, would throw everything into chaos again. So they insist that any credible government that can possibly form in the UK must all agree that we should rejoin the EU, to make sure that a future government can't just derail the entire process. And the same thing is also true of single market membership, although to a lesser extent. I think there are fewer barriers to that. But imagine the scenario still. So the Tories are removed from power. The next government negotiates veterinary agreements, security agreements, mutual recognition of qualifications, and the various other promises that Labour have made to reverse the trade barriers the Tories erected, or at least many of them. So let's say at the end of the alignment, the next Parliament, let's say towards the end of the next Parliament, we're in a good position to start thinking about rejoining the single market, and the public have moved as well, and they are very eager at this point. More specifically, when I say the voters, I mean the key target voters, the 10% of people who vote, whose votes ultimately matter. Let's say they are very keen. There's still a problem for the EU. Joining the single market is way easier than joining the EU fully, of course. The negotiation should be more straightforward, relatively speaking. There'll be no discussions about currency or anything like that. It's basically, can we comply with the single market rules? Have we got the infrastructure in place? Are we going to agree to these rules? If the answer is yes, it shouldn't be that difficult. But let's say Labour win the next election, whether as a minority government or whatever, I think that's still more likely. And they push ahead with alignment, which is what they're promising to do. Then the following election, they have a manifesto promise of rejoining the single market. Never mind what Starmer's saying at the moment. But what if, because we forgot to implement proportional representation again, let's just say we got that careless again, the Tories win the following election? Now, what if they're still supporting Brexit at this point? They may campaign on a promise of leaving the single market again. Now, I think this is unlikely, quite frankly. I don't think there would be support for that policy after another decade, because you'd be talking about another 10 years or so, wouldn't you? But you can't rule it out. What's more, the EU can't rule it out. If this happened, EU trade with Britain would be thrown into turmoil again. Right now, the EU doesn't really have a bad deal because they have their border restrictions in place because we chose to be a third country, so that means all those checks have to take place. So that makes British businesses much less competitive in the single market. So that's good for the EU, or what remains of the EU. But on the other hand, the same trade barriers are much lower the other way. Because the UK cannot afford to put in much in the way of customs checks and can't afford standards checks at all, then the EU businesses can export to Britain relatively easily. Not as easily as if we were part of the single market, but much easier than the other way around. So it's not a bad scenario for the... Yes, they've got the hassle over the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Tories refusing to stick to their own promises. But by and large, the trading arrangements for the wider EU are not too bad. And even if we ended up with a serious trade war and the Trading Cooperation Agreement was dissolved, it still wouldn't be that bad because we still wouldn't be able to put in the trade barriers, the border restrictions in place because, first of all, the Tories are not putting any serious efforts into doing so, and we haven't got the infrastructure, and that infrastructure is not likely to materialise anytime soon. So, but if we join the single market and then a future Tory government says, right, we're going to go out the single market again, the whole thing's in turmoil. Absolute nightmare for the EU. So it may well be that the EU are even reluctant to consider letting us join the single market until the Tories have at least softened their Brexit position. Now, like I say, I think they will. I would go so far as to say I think it's inevitable. You know, I think they only went along with Brexit to save their party. It was, you know, the Brexiteers in the party were willing to split the party, destroy the party to get what they wanted. The rest of them weren't going along with it, but they sort of had to save their party, which in government you can understand that. But if Brexit becomes the thing that imperils their party again, I think they will change their attitude. We've already had one Tory MP suggesting that we should rejoin the single market recently. I think it's inevitable that this view will become more mainstream in the party over time, especially if they are in opposition and forced to face up to a few things. Like in government, the problem that they have at the moment is Brexit is considered an electoral asset for them. But once it becomes seen as an electoral liability for them, they'll have to change. But it has to happen as well. It's not just that I think that they will change, it has to change in order for the EU to not be concerned that any moves towards much, much closer alignment will be wrecked by a future Conservative government. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.